Well, thanks for the introduction and thanks for having me. My name's Keith. I've worked in the water industry about 20 years, mainly in operations. But as you all know, the situation regarding untreated sewage being released detonated in about 2021, which I'll kind of go into that. And what that happened is most water companies, whether you live in North, South, Midlands, or wherever, have strategies now for dealing with combined sewer overflows and better urban drainage. So that's been my main occupation now for getting on for 5 years. So when I do these things, it's difficult to know what level to pitch it at because it is a very technical subject. And on one hand, I could be delivering a presentation to industry experts, and I could embellish and go into very great detail. And some days I'm dealing with very angry people who have just read their social media feed and their mind's made up, and I can't go into so much detail. So what I've done today is I've pitched it at the level of educated adults with a view of a lot of parish councillors or town councillors who are dealing with concerned residents and kind of want the balanced view of it. So that's going to be the main meat on the bone today. And just to kind of go over it, no matter where you live, all water companies will be tackling it in some way, shape, or form. So what we'll go through today is my learnings and of about 5 years of going through it. So if I can just share my screen, can everybody see my screen?
Yes. Yeah.
Good. Perfect. How about now? Is the full screen there?
Yay.
Lovely. Okay, right. I will start with just a few caveats and kind of myth busters before I go on, because I kind of need to give everyone a basic grounding in urban drainage before I go into the nuts and bolts of it. So the stories you hear about someone pressing a red button and releasing sewage indiscriminately because it's cheaper is a fabrication. Combined sewer overflows are automated, regulated by a certain flow rate by the Environment Agency. And like them or not, they're there to protect something, mostly people's homes. So where I live on the Isle of Wight and areas of South Hampshire, if we just block these things up, people would flood so frequently that their homes would be uninhabitable. So combined sewer overflows protect probably hundreds of thousands of homes from flooding. So the option just to block them up doesn't exist. The next point is what we use our sewers for. If water companies only had to treat sewage, we wouldn't need them. The fact of the matter is we treat rainwater as well. So with generally, as a rule of thumb, wastewater infrastructure is designed for dry weather flow, so kind of summer flow after 2 weeks worth of no rain, times 3. That's what the general basis for the design of our sewage apparatus is: dry weather flow times 3. When it rains, we get dry weather flow times 10. So 10 times the normal flow comes through our system. So we only had to treat sewage, we wouldn't have CSOs. And then networks have a finite capacity. We cannot push the limits of it. We either flood people or it becomes prejudicial to the treatment, because sewage works do not like rainwater coming in there. We mainly rely on biological treatment. So the bugs do the treatment at the works. If we water that down with rainwater, we get a poorer quality effluent and we end up polluting that way either. So there is an upper limit as to what we can actually achieve with our network. And my job really is I don't really work on our apparatus. I work on taking rainwater out. So roads, roofs, driveways, a third-party apparatus, that's where I spend the bulk of my time working with landowners to remove that from the foul sewer, because that's what's causing the excess flow and the combined sewer overflows. Then just a couple of other points is that the actual impact of CSOs, the environmental impact of them, as disgusting as it is poorly understood. So if you look at the health of our rivers and our waterways, if you were just to take CSOs out of the equation overnight, we would still have pollution. Things like agriculture is a big source of eutrophication, nitrates and phosphates in our waterways, and road runoff as well. So all the roads we drive along, generally those roads either go into our sewers or they go out to the environment. That road runoff has hydrocarbons, microplastics, brake disc stuff, all that stuff just gets washed in. So yes, CSOs quite rightly attract a lot of scrutiny and attention, but they are not the only source of pollution. And then finally, my personal experience of this is, in one way, it's a good thing that water companies have got so much scrutiny. So in 15 years in the industry, we were the silent service. No one really knew about us, and we just went on in the background. In the 5 years, it's all just detonated, and it's actually been a good thing because we get a lot of focus and energy. However, painting water companies as the pantomime villain is affecting retention. So if we have a job vacancy, it's difficult to recruit. People who are of certain dispositions can't work for us because they just can't handle the scrutiny. And we need good, intelligent, dedicated people to come in and fix this. And that's hard to come by if people think we're all crooks when we're not. So that's kind of one of the unintended effects of these high levels of scrutiny. Then just a little bit about my team, and I'd emphasize the point that if you're just not in the Southern Water region, all the companies have some teams tackling what I'm tackling. We formed in 2021, and we were a research and development project funded by our owners for a good 3 years, with the view of finding new ways and techniques to reduce storm overflows. Because generally, we'd build a big tank at the end of the pipe, or we'd put more through the works, but what we've been trying to do is demonstrate that actually taking the flow out from the system is more effective than dealing with it once it's in there. And that's grown to where we are now, where we're administrating a £1.5 billion program to fix well over 200 CSOs. So I'm going to go into the technical stuff now, because this is where I find my energy. What you can see on the screen is a level in the sewer. So the solid brown line is the level in the sewer, and the blue line is the rainfall. Either side of the brown line, you can see there's light brown tram lines, so dash lines. That's an AI model predicting how the level in the sewer will respond to rainfall. So you can see when it rains, the brown line goes up, and the lines either side of it loosely follow it. So on the far right-hand side, when it goes above the red line, that's where the combined sewer overflow activates. The system reaches its capacity and we spill. And the AI model is kind of tracking that and predicting where that level will go. So it stands to reason, if you can plot it on a graph, you can get the data behind it. And here's what we have. Here's a list of our combined sewer overflows on the Isle of Wight. And what this gives you is a percentage chance that storm overflow will operate given a set rainfall event. So if we look at the top, the key Newport, if we get 5 millimeters of rain in an hour, that's got a 20% chance of spilling. If we get 10 millimeters of rain an hour, it's got a 67% chance of spilling, so on and so forth. Whereas if you go to the bottom, it's pretty depressing reading. Fairley Road Newport has a 100% chance of spilling after 5 millimeters of rain. So that's pretty depressing and not in line with anyone's expectations. However, one would think that you don't have to take a lot of stormwater out to drastically improve the performance of that particular combined sewer overflow. So before we start digging up the road or building stuff, we really need to do what characterize the combined sewer overflow. How sensitive is it to rainfall? And how much rainfall do we think we need to take out of the system to achieve a better performance of that? Then we look at the hydraulic model to tell us where the water's coming from. So we have these heat maps produced. And what these heat maps tell us is, in a particular catchment, where the water's coming from and where we need to look for it. So on the left, we've got Cowes. On the right, we've got Wootton. And the darker the area, the more water is coming from that particular area. So in that area, you would expect to find car parks, roads, roofs, with all of their drainage connected into the foul sewer. And that would be a very happy hunting ground to target combined sewer overflow reduction, because if those things are connected, when it rains, it overwhelms our system. We need to work with whoever owns that land to take that stormwater out. And then there are no shortcuts for the next step. We need to die test to prove that. So on the left-hand side, we have a map of an area in Gosport where all the greens is not connected and all the reds are connected. So there's no shortcut. We need to tip dye down highway gullies, down people's downpipes, and build up a picture of what's actually connected, so we can work with the owner of the road or the properties to disconnect that and take that water out, because that rainwater doesn't need treating. Its only purpose is overwhelming and serves to overwhelm our system.
This is loft. Good grief.
Was that a question, or is someone just not on mute?
Wow.
Can we get questions to the end, please? Because Keith's in flow here.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah,
questions at the end. And then kind of moving into the process, first thing we do is we look at our network to make sure that every last drop is being treated, and our network is operating at full capacity. So on the bottom left, you can see the kind of green tanks on the left. They were kind of left there as a redundant apparatus, and we're now using them as storage. On the right-hand side, the kind of cartoon diagram, you can see a 90 litre a second pumping station pumps to a 60 litre a second pumping station. Again, you know, that's just not going to work very well, because the downstream pumping station is going to get overwhelmed. So we'd look to hold back flow in that situation. And then at the top, we're kind of using smart AI to balance our network. So there's a kind of gate valve you can see at the top there. That gate valve holds back flow to protect combined sewer overflows downstream. So we hold back flow within the pipes, so we only spill at the last minute. However, the tanks that you can see on the left, they hold about 10 million litres worth of water. And you'd look at that and you think, wow, they're never going to fill up. They're absolutely huge. This is what the trend looks like over the course of a winter. And you can see they fill up in about 12 hours. And that flow needs to be returned back to treatment. And you can see on the left-hand side, we're trying to return the flow and it rains again. Trying to return the flow and it rains again. On the right-hand side, you can see that those big tanks have caught the occasional spill, but they fill up really quickly and they take about 4 days to return. So if you're going to take anything away from this particular chart, water companies aren't just going to go around and build tanks everywhere and they're going to be successful. And if you're, you know, I've heard some people talking on the call already about climate change. A cubic meter of water weighs a ton. And one of the biggest costs for water companies is power, of just moving this water around in circles. And there comes a point of handling all this rainwater. The environmental benefit caused by not spilling isn't offset by the CO2 footprint of just pumping all this water around. So tanks aren't generally going to work, especially in big urban areas, because they fill up and they stay full. And then they've got the unintended consequence of huge CO2 footprint of handling what it is. So the only real sustainable way to do it is to take the water out. Here is kind of the next step in our spill reduction process, is where developers have built a new estate and they've separated out their stormwater. They've done the right thing. So they've got a foul system for toilet, sink, dishwashers, and they've got a storm system for roads and roofs, but they've had nowhere to put it. So they've put it into our sewer. So on the right-hand side, you can see exactly that. You can see the blue line, which is the storm sewer, and the brown line, which is the foul sewer. And then they join up, which is a photograph that I took when it was raining. So again, that's just all stormwater. It doesn't need to go in our system. We just need to put it somewhere else, i.e. the environment, or in a soakaway, or in a storm drain, because again, that's just water that doesn't need treating. Then, as you saw from the kind of diagram earlier, we know which roofs are connected, and we go through almost like a hierarchical process with these roofs. First of all, can we just disconnect them? So take the water out of one pipe and put it somewhere else. That's the best thing we can do. Or we work with customers to dig soakaways in their back garden, because each one of these houses can put about 60 tons of water into our system every year just through rainfall. And some, there's pretty cool stuff that you can do with rainwater on properties. And we've also been paying people to depave. So the bottom two pictures is a before and after picture, where someone's got all these concrete blocks and we're paying people per square meter to depave. And these people have put permeable paving and shingle down, which, in my view, not only looks a lot nicer, but just doesn't run off and cause flooding and pollution problems elsewhere. And then we have big maps done of the catchments, and we have all the buildings more than 300 meters squared coloured in red. And we go and knock on the door of all of those buildings and say, is your roof water connected? So in the middle picture, there's a big ambulance depot, the big green building. and it was about 3,000 meters squared in total, all connected into the foul sewer. And we disconnected that. So a huge amount of flow coming off that one roof and causing the CSO to activate downstream. And then the final part is we work with local authorities to install sustainable drainage on the public highway. So that the single biggest contributor towards storm overflows is runoff from the public highway. And across the region, we want to work with local authorities to put in sustainable drainage. And what I mean by that is little rain gardens by the side of the road that soak water away, tree pits, permeable paving, that just takes pressure from our system. And then, in my view, leaves the area a lot nicer because people want to spend time where there's a bit of greenery in town centres, and it's got some biodiversity benefits. It helps pollinating insects and urban cooling and all those fringe benefits. But from my selfish perspective, it stops rainwater getting into the foul sewer. And then in the kind of swales and ditches that you can see, that's in a primary school where all of the roof drainage from the primary school now is diverted into that ditch with kind of stepping stones and a wildflower meadow in the field for the kids to play in. So I'm just going to give a case study to kind of bring all that together. In Fareham, there's a CSO in the high street, and it releases untreated sewage into the River Wallington, which is a shellfish water, a Ramsar, which is a wetland designation. It's a special area of protection, a triple SI, and it affects a bathing water. And in 2023, it's spilt 92 times, which is completely unacceptable. So going through the process, we looked at the heat map and we found out, where the hydraulic model thought the stormwater was coming from. And we dye tested everything. And we found out on the diagram on the right that almost every single roof property that we tested was connected to the foul sewer, and even some of the public highway, which is coloured in brown, was connected as well. So we went door to door and we disconnected people. And the photograph on the left is where we've put a soakaway in for a customer in that circle there. Underneath there's some crates and a soakaway. And on the right, we found a whole car park connected. So we put that into a soakaway and stormwater system there, and that car park gave us 3,500 meters squared of impermeable area that is now no longer connected. And then we disconnected the large warehouse, which was over 2,000 meters, and in the end, all in all, we got over 50 properties disconnected from the system. Now, if you can remember this chart from earlier, the brown line is the level in the sewer, and the dotted lines where the AI model has predicted a spill. And here's two examples of where the AI model has predicted a spill, but we haven't actually had a spill because of all the stormwater that we've removed. So in essence, my job is to kind of confuse this AI model into thinking that, well, you should have had a spill, but you didn't, because it doesn't understand why. And well, the reason why is because it has got to drain a car park, all those 50 roofs, and all of those buildings as well. So about a year on, we've removed a hectare of rainwater impermeable area from the system. And in 2025, although it was a dry year, it only spilled 12 times, which is probably 12 too many, but still way down from the 90 odd it had before. And it has survived a 15 millimeter rainfall event, which is quite significant. So the blue line is the predicted spill count, and the red line is the actual spill count for 2025. So it's still tracking way below where the AI model would say it is. So what's next? We continue into large urban areas to try and find out where the water's coming from, and also almost build up a picture of how much this stuff is going to cost. So I can tell you that if you're going to go door to door disconnecting domestic properties, you pay between 150 and 250 pounds per square metre. Soakaways are a bit cheaper, but the real value comes in finding big warehouses, schools, churches, community centres connected, because the non-domestic houses, you pay 50 pounds per square metre because you get more bang for your buck. And then if you want to work with local authorities for highway suds, it's more expensive, 300 to 500 pounds per square metre. So there's kind of my successes over the course of a few years. Saved well over 500 spills across all of those CSOs. But a question that I get asked quite a lot is how can I help? So I always ask everyone to look at their property and say, do you need all the permeable stuff? Everyone's generally got a driveway nowadays. People extend and build a conservatory. There's ways of doing it with water butts and soakaways where you don't need to drain it into the foul sewer, and make sure that your property is connected properly. Always try and collect rainwater with water butts, slow it down. Can you divert your downpipes onto your flower bed so it doesn't need to go into the sewer? And then speak up for green places in your community. Take an interest in local planning matters. Again, I'll go through in a bit more detail, but water companies aren't statutory consultees in the planning process, and there's an automatic right to connect. So generally, all these new houses that are being built, water companies don't get much of a say in where that's ultimately connected. It should be common, but you only flush the 3 Ps, pee, poo, and paper. We still see loads of problems with wet wipes, and most blockages and problems are caused by wet wipes in the sewer. And then if you do see something that's not right, report it to either the Environment Agency or your local water company. Now, going into a bit more detail about the link between CSOs and water quality, all the bathing water beaches that you see, the Environment Agency goes out once a week and tests the bathing water for intestinal enterococci and E. coli. Now, a campaigner would say, well, once a week isn't good enough. It's just one point in time. And you can't answer the question, is it safe to go in? Is it safe for me to swim? Now, the problem with bacteriological sampling is it needs to go off to a laboratory and be analysed for 24 to 48 hours until you get the results back. Now, we came across a kit that took hours rather than days to get a result, because it measures a proxy, and we gave it to some citizen scientists to say, go and have some fun with this. And what they decided to do is take a sample every day from Sandown and Yaverland Beach on the Isle of Wight, and here are the results. So if the bar chart is the E. coli result, and if there's a dot underneath it, there was a combined sewer overflow on that day. I think it would be fair to say that there's muddled results. There are high results on days where there haven't been spills, and there are low results on days where there has. So really the next step for us is to kind of show this to a statistician and try and draw conclusions from it. But again, trying to draw a link between water quality and CSO activation is quite hard, because generally when it rains, you get a lot of runoff from agriculture on the roads. And could you blame that particular high result on the CSO or the CSO itself? I don't know. It's very, very difficult to do. And I think you'd be a very rich person if you could draw that link, but not defending CSOs. I'm trying to build up a balanced picture of their actual impact here. My personal view is that there are some CSOs that profoundly affect the water course, but I think there are some that don't. And we need to kind of take a balanced view on which aspects of urban drainage we deal with to improve water quality and which ones we don't. Those of you who are familiar with the regulation know that the Environment Act got done up, and it's putting a requirement of water companies to measure real-time upstream, downstream of CSOs. And then what that'll do over the next 5 years is to answer that question and build up a better picture of water quality and how much impact CSOs have. The other activities that my team and I do is really to do with lobbying, planning, and improvement. So some water companies are already doing area-based charging. I think United Utilities do, Anglian do. And what it means by that is we charge companies by their area. So at the moment, the most our non-domestic customers can pay is about £2,000 for their surface water drainage. Whereas if you've got, say, an Amazon-style distribution centre, that's bonkers. So much flow is going to come off there. And what we hope it will do is encourage people with large impermeable areas to think more about their drainage and how they could drain it more sensitively. And then we're reviewing our stormwater management policy. So to be clear, we cannot reject new applications to connect water to our system. We can't object to planning applications or reject it. Unfortunately, that went to the Supreme Court about 17 years ago, Welsh Water versus Barrett Developments. Welsh Water argued that you can't connect into their system, it will cause flooding and pollution. Barrett Homes said that you don't have a choice. It went to the Supreme Court and it ruled in Barrett's favour. And from that point onwards, there was an automatic right to connect, an absolute right to connect. Now, we don't necessarily think that's the right thing for CSOs, because if more stuff is connected, my team are going to have to take it out, which is quite frustrating. So it's about working with local authorities and planning authorities to encourage developers to do the right thing. Speaking positively, big developments are generally really good, and you see lots of sustainable drainage. I would say that it's the cumulative impact of lots of smaller things that's the problem. So driveways, infills, conservatories, that's probably a bigger problem that needs tackling rather than bigger developments. And then Schedule 3. So this is a piece of legislation that would really help us. It's already been implemented in Wales. It's Schedule 3 of the Flood and Water Management Act. Now, that removes the automatic right to connect, which doesn't exist in Scotland or Wales. And it allows water companies to stop development on the grounds of capacity. And it also makes sustainable drainage mandatory for all developments. Now, we really want that piece of legislation enacted. We think it's really going to help. As things stand, the government isn't providing any timescales on that, which is quite frustrating. And then we are a statutory consultee in local plans, and working to synchronise our investment with plans, but it's going to be very difficult for water companies to reconcile the planning and infrastructure bill with our storm overflow reduction plan. So we do a fair amount of lobbying and engagement in public affairs with politicians and regulators and lawmakers. So what's next? So for us, we've got about 1,000 storm overflows in our region. Half of them are already hitting the government target of 10 spills per year, but half of them aren't. So we've got a £1.5 billion programme to do that. I emphasise that the majority of that isn't going to be on our apparatus. It's going to be taking out stormwater that doesn't need treating. And we publish all our spills on our Cleaner Rivers and Seas, and you've got a toggle on there. So you can toggle how and what's spilling and when, but then you can go on to the other part of it and say, well, what are we doing about it? And where are we going to invest and when? Because that's one of the things. So all water companies have this in some way, shape or form. And I'd encourage you to go and have a look, not only to see how frequently your local CSO activates, but also what the local water company is going to do about it and when. So just go a little touch on the law. The Environment Act says by 2035, all water companies will have approved all storm overflows discharging into bathing waters, and 75% of storm overflows discharging into high priority areas. So by improved, the government has quantified that as 10 spills per year. So the magic 10 spills per year is what we're all trying to achieve. And then by 2050, no storm overflows will be permitted to operate outside of unusually heavy rainfall or cause adverse ecological harm. So by 2050, all combined sewer overflows by law have to be under 10 spills per year. Just a word on partnership. Most urban areas need replumbing to some extent to achieve this. So water companies will not make this go away by themselves. In some cases, we will be able to treat more, pump more, or build tanks. But in a lot of cases, we won't be able to achieve this alone. We're going to need to work with landowners, local authorities, customers. And at the moment, we have no statutory rights or powers to do that. We cannot work on apparatus that's not ours without permission. So, we need changes in behaviour, legislation to ensure that this is going to be successful. So if I'm just going to wrap this up, because I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions waiting for me. By law, water companies have to reduce storm overflows and will make big improvements over the next 5 years. My fear is that this is just going to be seen as a water company problem, when really it's everyone's problem, because I'm sure there's people on this call with their roofs and their driveways and conservatories draining into the foul sewer. This isn't something that's just going to go away and water companies are going to go away and fix it. It's going to need a huge amount of public engagement and participation. And sometimes I knock on a door and people are like, oh, you're that awful water company, you need to go away and fix it. And I'm like, well, it would really help if we could work on your property to disconnect, because that's what's causing it. So, yeah. And then the Section 82 of the Environment Act, which I alluded to, was the upstream and downstream monitoring of combined sewer overflows in real time. And that will allow us to quantify the impact of some of these combined sewer overflows and perhaps tackle the ones that are the worst. And then, something that I've put at the bottom, this, I think we're already starting to see a little bit of fatigue in the issue, in the sense that when it all detonated in 21-22, it's kind of going off the boil a little bit. Some of the campaign groups are running out of steam, but there's a weird sense of symbiosis between them. So really, although, I'd take the view that us and the campaigners want the same thing, and we really need a bit of heat underneath it to keep driving it and drive the right solutions. So, but I don't know, if you guys have requested me to come on this call, I'd say that, you're kind of bought in, but there's a willingness to pay issue as well. And do people want to pay more for their water bills to get combined sewer overflows down? Some people do. Do the majority? I don't know. That's kind of for Ofwat and the Environment Agency to needs test. But we've had many, many decades of low water bills. And then when the water bills spike up like they have done, my job is to make sure every penny goes in the right way. But do most people agree with I don't know. That's a very, very difficult question to answer. But I think for the next 5 years, at least, we've got a real good opportunity to do something about it and make some big improvements. So I shall stop sharing, and there we go. Back in the call. So I appreciate that was very quick, and I went through quite a lot of time. But if anyone's got any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thanks very, very much for that, Keith. Yes, there was a lot of stuff there, but I think I've certainly managed to host on some of the key points about it. And we've got some hands in the air coming already. One thing I just wanted to check out in terms of, you put some prices against sort of soakaways in houses. Is that something the water company pays for, or is that something the householder pays for?
Yes, we are paying for it.
Okay.
With the view that it's water that doesn't have to be treated into our system. So over time, it will more than pay for itself. So going back to my point that a cubic meter of water weighs a ton, and each one of these houses, 50, 60 tons comes off it every year. That's water that doesn't need pumping. It doesn't need treatment chemicals. And overall, it's beneficial for us to have that water that doesn't need treating out of our system.
Right. Thank you very much. Well, I would... that sounds like a good move from a water company's point of view, and I could see how that spreads around the country. So Keith's happy to take some questions, and just as I said at the beginning, we're not here to harangue Keith or have a go at water companies. We're looking at how some of the technical stuff we've heard can be absorbed and dealt with. Ali, I see you've got, you can where it says react at the bottom of your screen, you'll be able to raise your hand there, but I acknowledge that you wanted to say something. Stuart from Essex, what would you like to ask?
Thank you. A very interesting talk and quite a lot to think about. When I drive along and see these huge warehouse roofs, I think, why haven't they got solar panels on them? You put a different slant on it with why are they draining into our sewage system? But a question I've got is, you work on an island. Why don't you tip the storm overflow straight into the Solent? I mean, certainly in Gurnard, that's quite near the coast.
The storm overflows do go into the Solent, unfortunately. They do. Far too frequently.
But without being mixed with foul water.
Well, again, if you were going to redesign the drainage of most urban areas, you would have a foul pipe for toilet sinks, dishwashers that would end up at a treatment works, and then you would have a stormwater sewer that would take roads, roofs, and then that would discharge out into environment. Unfortunately, old areas have what's called a combined system that takes everything. So bit by bit, we are taking stormwater out of that combined system and putting it in the environment. But then that is a very, very difficult process to do. Very, very difficult. It's disruptive. It's expensive. So it's how we achieve that with everyone's best interests.
But on a new estate?
Well, again, I'd look to local planning authorities to enforce that because we can't enforce it. So I would say that my challenge to all local planning authorities is all the new houses to be built should be the most water efficient and the most sustainable draining, because otherwise we're just going to have to take all the water out as soon as it's built, and it's just completely bonkers. So, for new houses that are built, I would expect them to have sustainable drainage and not discharge their stormwater into the foul sewer.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much. David.
You mentioned that quite often the loads come from people doing upgrades to the houses, conservatories, extensions. We get lots of planning applications like that coming to our parish. Where can we get the data to find out the impact of their proposed upgrade on water, on stormwater?
It's really a question for the buildings regulations department at the council, David. So the relevant part of the building regulations is called H3, which is a hierarchy. So the first thing that the consideration should be, the rainwater should be introduced to the ground as close as possible to where it fell. Hence why soakaways are preferable. But if you live in a kind of clay area, that's not always possible. So the next in the hierarchy is, could you put it in a watercourse, or could you put it in a stormwater sewer? And then, you've got that separation, which was kind of in line with the previous question. And then if all else fails, then you put it into the combined sewer, and it's our problem. Now, how we go about enforcing that and encouraging all these small kind of home improvements to do that is very, very difficult. And in some cases, we've actually gone to local authorities and funded additional building control and enforcement officers because it's in our best interest to do that. So the guidance and the regulations there, I wouldn't say it's consistently enforced across the UK. But that's what people should be doing. But then, if you've just, you're pleased with the new development and extension, unfortunately, drainage isn't the first thing that people think about, unless you're me.
Well, here we have a government, of course, trying to build lots and lots of more houses. So that's obviously going to be raising the stakes of what we've just been talking about. Thank you. Helen from Berkshire.
Hello. Very, very interesting. A question for you. My understanding is that sewer pipes are porous. And certainly in our area, we have a problem of water ingress into the porous pipes. Is there anything being done research-wise, I guess, about that? Or are there any, well, there's no easy solutions, or anything being done to resolve those types of issues?
Yes, Helen, there is. I mean, the groundwater ingress is. I mean, I've just purely talked about stormwater today, but there's another cause of spills, which is that you tend to get it in kind of low-lying, chalky areas, and that's where the groundwater level goes up above the level of the sewer and squeezes in. Really, you've got two options. You either seal all the sewers, and the way that we do that is we kind of put a balloon in the pipe and blow it up and push like a resin material to seal the sewer, or you treat the flow. Now, my job is to kind of figure out what's best for the environment and the community. Sometimes it's best to treat the flow, sometimes it's best to seal, but we've also got the added problem of the private network, because generally where you get low-lying chalky areas, you get very pleasant properties set back from the road, so the sewer's coming in along as well. So we've done both in some areas. We've sealed everything where we've had some success, or we've treated the flow. I mean, personally, it's a seasonal problem, and sometimes tankers have to come in and stop people from flooding, and it's a real nuisance. It's really, really disruptive. We want to get to the point with the regulators where we can use wetlands to treat the flow. And we're currently working with the Environment Agency in DEFRA to use that as an option. So we use wetlands. So, long-winded way of saying, yes, we either seal the network or treat all flow.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ali, Bembridge in the Isle of Wight, I believe. Yes.
Yes, that's right. So I was interested in your comment about hydraulic models and how you determine where the roof runoff is going, because most people probably don't know whether their roof runoff is going into the sewer or is going into soakaways or ditches. I've got a ditch down the side of my house that can take water away. So we need to reduce the amount of water going into the sewage system in Bembridge. And I would be interested in how, as an individual householder, you can find out where your roof runoff goes.
Sure. Well, I mean, there's a number of different theories here, Ali. I mean, if you lived in New Zealand, for instance, you can't sell your property without a full drainage survey and confirmation of all of that. Whereas in the UK, there's varying levels of due diligence that people do on the purchase of a property. Sometimes you get a full drainage survey and but if you're really that interested, there's no harm in just tipping dye down it and finding out yourself. But I mean, the curious thing about Bembridge is it does have a separate system. There's a foul and there's a storm all over Bembridge, but there's clearly a lot of things connected in there which shouldn't be. And over the coming weeks, we're going to find that out. If your water company is doing something like we're doing, it shouldn't be long and you'll know. Other than that, I think there is an element of personal responsibility as a homeowner to know how your property drains and where the water goes. And it's always useful to know if you get any problems.
So what sort of dye can you use, though?
Just sewer tracing dye. I'm sure if you type that into Amazon, you could probably get some delivered for a very reasonable price indeed. And then you just mix that with a little bit of water and it turns a purid green, blue, orange color. And then you can just find out where it goes. Word to the wise, if you are connected to a watercourse, don't turn that watercourse bright green because people will call up and think something really bad's happened from experience.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. Catherine. You're still muted, Catherine. There's an unmute button. There you go.
Right. Oh, hello. Sorry about that. Having a technical failure. I was just wondering, like if you and other water companies are planning on doing like much comms on this matter, because I don't really think that the general public understand much aside from being angry about spills. So it's like there's kind of now a bit of a stigma if you're not doing your recycling properly, but there's nothing like nobody sneers and looks at people that have just like paved over their driveway, if you know what I'm saying. So just wondering if there's any comms like planned.
Yeah, there is, but it's generally quite localized, Catherine. And you raise a really valid point. So typically, when we're doing connectivity work in the area, we have a public drop-in. We send out an exhaustive letter drop and try and put out as much as possible because it's one of these things that we really need the community on side for, because people are well within their rights to say, no, really sorry, not interested. You're not digging up my drive. You're not diverting my stormwater. I don't want anything to do with it. Come and tell me when it's done. And typical response rates are actually pretty good. So, excuse me. So where we were separating out the domestic properties, we were getting a 50-60% hit rate, which I consider to be really good. And the majority of people didn't say no. The majority of people was just like, well, I've just had my driveway done. I really don't want you digging it up. And that's fine. We're not trying to get every single property out. We're just trying to get most of them out. So, but yeah, just like everything we do, there's so much scrutiny in it. And we've got to get the community on side and on board. And, some of the things that we've thought about is, well, tell you what, why don't we just, get a lump sum and donate it to a charity if we get the CSO spills down below a certain level, so we can kind of work with the community. We go and build a nice park for the kids, or redo a town centre or something, because we're not just going to get this on our own. So that's why we've got a whole partnership team now, just doing that kind of stuff, to really kind of pave the way for people to accept the solution that we propose.
Wow, great. Thanks very much for that. Great. Sue Burton.
Okay, got a few questions. Thank you. First of all, can you explain further what you mean about the dye? Because where I live, there are no obvious watercourses. I'm in a road with a number of houses, tarmac down the road. Do I presume that my water is going into the foul water? It's an old property, an old road. What do I presume?
I think somewhere on your property there will be an inspection cover, that you can lift and see the pipes underneath. And typically what we do is we tip dye down the downpipes and find out where that goes. Sometimes we can do it on the property. Sometimes we can lift the covers in the road and prove it that way. I wouldn't recommend lifting covers in the road, because that's the water companies, and you'll need traffic management. You don't want to get hit by a car or anyone drive down it. But on your property, if you're not confident doing it yourself, there's plenty of contractors that could do that for you.
What sort of contractor would you be thinking of, Keith?
I can't recommend specific ones.
No, I mean, but what are they called? Are we talking about a
Um,
plumber? What am I talking about?
No, just general drainage contractors. So
Okay.
if you typed in drainage survey and the
Okay.
town of where you live, there'd be plenty of people that would come to your property and do that. And I would also add that most water companies offer a rebate. I wouldn't get too excited. It's about 20, £30 a year, but they offer a rebate if your stormwater doesn't go into their system. We're working to get that increased to try and incentivize people to do, what you're thinking about, and diverting their stormwater somewhere else.
Right. Brilliant. So my other thing, bringing back, I was also going to ask you about comms, because I live in Battle in East Sussex, nice and high up. I
Yes.
can't believe that we'll be high on your list for looking at our community because of our location. But there are things that residents can do, and one is the 3Ps. And then, of course, there's the driveways, the extensions, and saving water. And in the past, there's been you could contact, I'm not sure if it's your water company, but our local water company, and get a slow shower head and bits and bobs. And I think that the prevention and education of people widely is to be encouraged. All of us probably have our connections with our parishes, and we can send stuff out. Remind people of the 3Ps. If you're thinking of doing a driveway, the benefits of doing one that has drainage, has some, whatever you call it, not has a sustainable surface, and I think anything that we can get that is easy for us to distribute to our residents would be really helpful.
No, I agree. And, most water companies, Southern Water included, have outreach schemes to, encourage people for better water usage. Because, as you say, education is a lot better than anything else. And people turning off the tap when they brush their teeth, and filling up the dishwasher, and all of that stuff makes a big impact.
Yeah. I suppose what I'm saying is, can we move it on to extensions, driveways, because in the past it's mainly about water saving.
Yeah, and this comes to the really difficult thing, is that water companies do not have a say really in the planning process, especially not for smaller ones. So our efforts are targeted towards planning officers, building control, and local tradespeople to try and A, get the connection right, but B, make sure that people aren't just paving over land that currently soaks water away and it now runs off into our system. So we are working with local authorities, but to be brutally honest, Sue, we need help.
Yeah, well, I'm really pleased you've been here today. It's another segment in knowing about water and
how we can manage it and better, and the clean water and all that. It's always another segment to understanding the picture and what we can do.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think some things in terms of how we share good practice with people is something that the Great Collaboration is set up to do, and partly it's the way you tell them, but also I think David's had to leave the meeting. But if there is information, technical information, data that can help underpin some of these messages, that's very good too. So that's all that's all that needs to come together. Andrew from the Isle of Wight, you've got your hand up. You're still muted, Andrew. Yeah.
So is that better? Hello.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah. Thanks, Keith, for coming today, and perhaps a little apology for a recent bashing we've given you from Bembridge on our CSO issue. I think there is quite difficult to one appreciates the efforts that Southern Water are making, but then equally we see sort of CSO discharges going up all the time. But I wanted to, you've slipped into your presentation about people perhaps paying more to sort this out, and that we've had decades of low bills. I just want to check your justification on having decades of low bills when we've had decades of excess dividends, loan interest payments, and so on.
It's fine. I mean, I can tackle that. That's fine. I mean,
Okay.
Southern Water hasn't paid a dividend since 2017. So again, things like this, the facts are important, and the whole argument around nationalisation versus private ownership. I mean, it's not something we're going to solve on this call, but what I would add is that when Macquarie took over Southern Water, they pumped in about 1.5 billion. And if Thames Water ever is nationalised, the customers will see that it's then in competition with schools, healthcare, defence. And going back to the start of my presentation, it hasn't been the sexy one that's got all the funding. So again, it's not really for the content of this meeting, but I can't see a world in where customers are going to get a better service if it's nationalised, purely because it's going to be in competition with anything else. And most public services are almost back to the statutory function, where the ability to generate capital is one of the good things that we get to do. So, the 1.5 billion programme that I'm doing at the moment, I've got to make sure that we strike while the iron's hot, and while there's a bit of focus, we get all that good work done. I couldn't see something like that happening nationally. And then all you've got to do is look north at Scotland, which is still under government ownership, and there's not really much of a row in Scotland because they haven't got alarms on their combined sewer overflows. So one could argue that the high levels of transparency around what we do has generated that interest. And so this whole thing about England being the dirty one of Europe, I struggle with that. All of the world's cities have combined sewer overflows because they're combined systems, most of them anyway, especially the historic ones. Look at Paris, where the swim was postponed because there was CSOs in the Seine. But in Scotland, there's not alarms on all the CSOs, so you can't have any discourse about them. You can't run reports on how frequent they are, where in England, you can absolutely do that. You can just go on any app and you can find out how often they go for how long, etc. So, I think that's the debate that's going to rumble on. But it's not something that we're going to solve here, unfortunately.
Didn't look to, but thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm certainly hosting a lot more. I've just made a note to myself: turn off the tap when I'm cleaning my teeth. All these little things. One thing that did come to me, I know in some ways, there's another organisation called Communities Prepared, and they're saying, well, we've got to deal with floods, but then it's not just about getting rid of the water, because there'll be droughts when you actually want some of that water, how you can use it. And I know in some parts of the country there are people funding, water butts and so forth. I have a dream is that local authorities, as well as providing green bins for rubbish, can provide water butts for places that are useful. I mean, that's a small thing. That's a very localized thing. But I mean, I don't know how, in the great scheme of things, Keith, would that, how much impact would that make, do you think? Is that an important thing to everybody have water butts?
Well, from a water efficiency perspective, they're fantastic. In terms of stopping water hitting our system, they're quite low down the pecking order because, even the biggest water butts only take 200-300 litres, so they fill up quite quickly. And then during the course of the winter, they tend to stay full. So we need to design a mechanism so they slowly drain down and are sensitive to the network. I mean, we have handed out many, many thousands of them, and they do make an impact. But things get moved around people's garden, they get blocked and they get used for other things. So it's not really the best sustainable solution. But also, the areas I tend to work are kind of older Victorian townhouse areas that are combined, and it's trying to get them in is very, very difficult. People don't want a big ugly green water butt outside their property. But anyway, I do apologize. I have a 12 o'clock meeting with a hard cutoff. But I would just like to say thanks for having me. Thanks for the interesting questions, and I hope you got a lot out of it.
Very many thanks, Keith. Brilliant. It was great to have some of that background and data. And as and when we might need some more technical information to speed up some communications, your phone may well ring. Many thanks for giving us all of those details.
Cheers, guys. Bye.
Thank you, Keith.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yep, very good. Interesting.
Well, that was something, wasn't it? My word. A rare opportunity, I suspect, to actually hear from a water company in an open forum like this. So there we go.
Can I speak?
Sue, go for it.
Yeah, so I went to, I think it must have been pre-COVID, a talk with our local water company. And they talked the same bit about finding out who was wrongly connected and the extensions. They were talking about that then. And it sounds like, I missed the beginning, that work has really stepped up in bigger communities are being challenged, etc. So I think they are coming along, but they're now. It seems to be the question I didn't ask, because I'm not very knowledgeable on it, is where does this fit in with the planning legislation, the NFPF, whatever it is, the National
Planning Policy Framework.
Yeah. So is there some hope to help the connections in that? Does anybody know?
Well, that's a good question. The present government has already changed the National Planning Framework once, and it's busy changing it again. And I think sometime this summer we're going to get to see it. So we can't yet say what the answer is. The current government seems to be desperate to build houses almost at any cost. In the previous version of the National Planning Policy Framework, there was a footnote saying, "P.S. Be careful of prime agricultural land." That's been taken out by this government. And this is very relevant to 180 house application in my village. But I think that the idea that the local planning authorities, as well as the National Planning Policy, can have an impact on this, I don't think that is well known around the country. And I don't know. I'm going to have to look this up now as to what the previous National Planning Policy Framework said around that particular issue. How to develop building regulations which insist on certain things. The last Conservative government was going to bring in something last year about that. That seems to have got postponed. I don't think that's happened yet. So I think in terms of, there are things we can always be alert to locally. How we change things nationally in a positive way, I think that is a very good question. For myself, I decided decades ago not to get involved in national politics, but to work with communities. But sometimes you have to bang on the ceiling and send some messages upwards. But I will be as interested as you, Sue, to find out what the latest NPPF has to say.
Yeah, because that could help help it a lot. Because at the moment they're basically dealing with the outcome of what we have, rather than being supported to reduce the problem, basically.
And this is where it comes back to, the way we tell them, what's the languages, what are the messages, how we get those out there. We tend to get a lot of negative stuff in the press one way or another. How do we gather the best, the good practice? How do we put that in terms that people can accept? And how do we get the messages across so that people can feel enabled and empowered, if you like, to do something? There's this People's Emergency Briefing film going around the country. I know that it's been shown in Bembridge in particular. I don't know if you were there, Ali, but hopefully that can be also a bit of a springboard to people doing some more things locally. Did you go to any of those film screenings, Ali?
Yes, I did. I've been to 3, I think now, and we put together an action group to all taking on various tasks. So I seem to have taken on the task of getting allotments in the village and helping with food security, because I personally think that that's important. And for us, we don't really have much land available because it's all RSPB reserve.
Right. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
I keep saying to Graham, I will come to the Isle of Wight one day, but I enjoyed it thoroughly the last time I went, but it was rather a long time ago. Yes, allotments. I'm big on that, Mr. Allotments. That's me. See what else we can do about stuff. What I'm beginning to think about with other organisations that are also trying to share and gather and share good practice is, can we pull together stuff in a format that, if you're in a community, how do you assess what your risks and concerns are? How do you assess what your opportunities are? What are the things you need to look at? Water is one of them, clearly. Food is another. I haven't yet managed to find the document which explains why the current government is desperate to build all these hundreds of houses. I used to be able to find such a thing, but I haven't found it yet. What's the rationale behind it? But to put roof over people's heads and they just make the water system worse and they haven't got enough to eat, sounds to be a bit short-sighted. This is me on my soapbox now, but government's not historically not been very well joined up, and it hasn't helped. I think that government departments vie with each other for money from comprehensive spending reviews. So there are things that we need to think about at a national level. At the moment, we've got 5 political parties vying for people's votes. I don't think any of them are really playing the sort of environment card at the moment. They're all looking at other ways of trying to get people to vote for them, which is somewhat depressing. But what's the phrase? Keep calm and carry on, I think. But I think there's a message about keep calm and work differently, because the world is changing around us. We need to help people where we can, but also to think about what is the best plan going forward, and having greater local resilience so that communities do come together and talk about this stuff. And these film screenings does provide an opportunity for that. That's the opportunity we've got at the moment. Lots of those screenings happening all around the country.
Yeah, I think that water and food go together, though. Certainly in the hose pipe bans we've had the last few years, we need to look at preserving the rainwater that we get and finding access to it to use for growing food, basically. They're very closely linked.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Good. You've been listening carefully, Kathy. Have you got any thoughts about it? I can see you thinking there. See you thinking.
See the bubbles coming out of my head. Yeah, it's all very very involved, isn't it? One thing feeds onto another, that links into the other. I mean, Keith did talk about the spillages. In my instance, where we are in Kent, we get spillages when there isn't rain. So, there is a problem that we're getting, even when the sewage isn't capable of coping even without excess rainwater. But there is a large area, a lot of the building, most of the building in the area, a large estate was built 70 odd years ago, and it is all combined sewage, and it is a big issue. But more importantly at the moment, I think people have touched on it, is that it's the infilling. Is a lot of the bigger, older houses in the areas have got large gardens that are being hived off, and 4 houses here, 6 houses here, 10 houses there, and none of those, as a parish, have we been able to put any made any difference with getting proper drainage for those properties that is not going into the main sewage. And it's really, really disappointing that our local planners seem to be absolutely adverse and have stated in planning meetings that flooding is not an issue that they take into account, which is absolutely,
That's pretty depressing.
very depressing.
I mean, good Lord. I had somebody once, not long ago, say to me, "Oh, we're not worried about flooding because we live on a hill." Well, let's just say, just to hope you don't get cut off from your services by water around you.
Around you, yes, yes.
We hadn't thought of that, they said.
Having lived on a hill actually and been flooded because the water raced down through, came in the front door and out the back door going down the hill. So,
oh my God. Oh, I'm tired of this.
You can get it everywhere. But present moment, I live in the bottom end of a valley, but it's on very, very heavy clay, so it doesn't drain, and we get a lot of.
That's another thing. If people are assessing the issue, risk, opportunities in areas, the nature of your soil is a factor, isn't it? You know,
it's a big factor. Soakaways really just don't work for us. I mean, a number of years ago now, the parish paid for a bore hole down in a particular area to try and get some drainage in an area, and it went down to different areas of types of clay. It's Wealden clay or this clay or that clay. Was over I think down 50 meters down before it got to anything other than very heavy solid clay. So it was trying to dig a soakaway 50 feet down is not great.
Well, I was going to say, yeah,
absolutely impractical.
Where does it go from there? You know.
Yes, yeah, but it's interesting to hear what the Southern Water, because a number of years ago, how their attitude has actually changed. So sort of pre-pandemic, our flood forum were meeting with Southern Water, who are our local suppliers, well, for drainage anyway. And we were wanting to put a campaign on to get people to have water butts, that sort of thing, and they weren't interested at that point in time. So their attitude has really changed over the last, well, probably 8 years now rather than 5, but well, pre-pandemic, which is good to hear. I'm pleased that that's, I'm very interested if they're going to be willing to pay for resurfacing and that sort of some of the larger areas in there. That could help quite considerably. So it's been very interesting. Thank you for putting it on.
Yes,
no, that's fine. Yeah.
I must go.
We've got a good session, and we'll see you all next time.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
All right.
Cheers to it. Cheers, Kathy. Cheers, Sue.
I must go. I must go too. Thanks so much.
Okay, Sue, look after yourself.
And you. Bye-bye. I must come to the Isle of Wight too.
Okay. Yes, I think we should. I'm told they got a brewery there, so that'll be interesting.
I know. I want a guided tour of all these projects.
Yes, indeed.
Bye now.
Lots going on. Take care.
Bye.